Let me start with something that might quietly challenge how you think about change. Most people believe that their life will shift once they feel ready to be disciplined, ready to be confident, ready to finally feel like a different version of themselves. So they wait. They wait for motivation to show up. They wait for clarity. They wait for that right moment when things calm down. But identity doesn't change when you feel ready. Identity changes when your brain sees evidence. And today, my friends, I want to show you how small and almost boring daily wins are. These are what actually reshape who you become over time. No big resets, no hype, no motivational spikes, just quiet, repeatable proof that your system can trust. Because real identity, my friends, doesn't announce itself, it just settles in. Now, the biggest misunderstanding about identity is where most people get stuck. They believe identity changes first and then behavior follows. So they say things like, once I feel confident, I'll show up consistently. Once I feel disciplined, I'll stick to it. Once I feel motivated, this time it'll be different. But your brain, it doesn't work that way. Your brain doesn't believe your intentions. It doesn't believe your goals. And it definitely doesn't believe your motivational speeches at 10 p.m. Your brain believes patterns. It believes what you repeatedly do, especially under mild stress, inconvenience, or even resistance. That's why people can have powerful breakthroughs, strong starts, emotional resets, but then they find themselves back in the same pattern a week later. Not because they're lazy, not because they lack discipline, but because their nervous system never received enough evidence to update that identity. So why do big resets rarely stick? Well, big resets feel powerful because they create contrast. This new routine, new mindset, new version of you. But contrast without consistency doesn't rewrite identity. It excites that emotional brain for a moment and then it fades. Your nervous system doesn't trust intensity. It trusts repetition. That's why small daily wins work when everything else fails. They don't overwhelm your system. They don't require hype. They don't trigger internal resistance. They simply say, what did we say we were going to do? And that sentence alone is more powerful than most people realize. Let's talk about readiness for a moment. Waiting to feel ready feels logical. It even sounds responsible. But readiness isn't a requirement for change. It's often a protective response. Your nervous system is designed for safety, not growth. And safety means predictability. So it whispers things like, once things slow down, once this stress is over, once I feel more confident. The problem, my friend, is confidence is not the prerequisite. Confidence, it's the byproduct. Readiness doesn't create identity change. Consistency does. And consistency doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from choosing actions small enough that your system doesn't resist them. Now, doing this, your brain is consistently collecting data about you. Not emotional data, but behavioral data. Every time you follow through, even in a small way, your brain updates its internal model. Every time you don't, it updates its internal model too. This is happening quickly. It's happening automatically and without judgment. Think about it like this. Your brain is asking one question over and over again. Can I trust this person to do what they say? It's not asking in a dramatic way. It's asking in a pattern recognition way. And over time, the answer becomes your identity. Not the identity you want, but the identity you demonstrate. And this is why motivation doesn't create confidence. Because people just keep getting this backwards. They think motivation leads to confidence. But confidence comes after evidence. Confidence is not hype. It's familiarity. Confidence is your brain saying, I've seen this before. I know what happens next. I trust us to follow through. And that's why people who look disciplined don't feel like they're forcing themselves. They're not stronger. They're not more motivated. Their system simply expects follow through because it's proven it enough times. You don't decide your way into your new identity. You repeat your way into one. Identity is a pattern your nervous system recognizes and stabilizes around. That's why trying to be disciplined never works. Discipline isn't a trait you activate. It's a behavior that becomes predictable. You don't become confident and then show up. You show up consistently enough that confidence no longer feels risky. This is subtle. And because it's subtle, most people miss it. They keep chasing intensity instead of reliability. Small daily wins work because they respect your nervous system. They don't require willpower reserves that you don't have. They don't demand a new personality overnight. They ask one simple question. What can I repeat even on my worst day? Not your best day, not your most motivated day, your worst reasonable day. That might be a 5-minute walk, one sentence written, one intentional pause before reacting, one promise kept to yourself. These actions, they don't impress anyone. But what they do is something far more important. They build internal trust. Most people live in a cycle of starting strong and stopping hard. They advocate effort with pressure, consistency with exhaustion, and discipline with burnout. So their system resists. Small wins break that association. They teach your nervous system that effort doesn't equal overwhelm. And once that belief changes, behavior becomes easier. Not because life changed, but because your system did. At some point, something subtle happens. You stop needing to convince yourself. You stop negotiating. You stop restarting. Not because you fixed yourself, but because your brain no longer questions follow through. And that, my friends, is the moment identity shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. You simply become someone who does what they say more often than they don't. And that changes everything. When identity is built this way, identity is built through these small, consistent wins. Comparison loses its grip. You stop needing that external validation. Decisions, they just feel lighter. Self-trust stabilizes. Not because life is easier, but because you no longer are at war within yourself. You don't rely on motivation. You rely on structure that your system trusts. My friends, this is not about doing more. It's not about being more productive or hustle or optimizing every minute of your day. It's about alignment. It's about becoming someone your nervous system recognizes as reliable. One small win at a time. You don't need a massive reset. You don't need a new identity. You need small, repeatable actions your system can trust. That's how identity changes. Quiet, consistent, for good. So if this message landed with you and you want to go deeper, I want to point you to 2 different places. First, go listen to last Monday's podcast. I called it the comparison trap, getting out of your own way. And what it does is it breaks down how comparison disrupts identity and how to rebuild your internal compass. And then earlier this week on the Adam Henson coaching community, I went live and I talked about the real you, a reset for your identity baseline. This conversation helps you recollaborate what normal has quietly become in your new life. Because the goal isn't to become someone else, it's to become consistent with who you are already becoming.